Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here. And today I'm bringing you guys my top 5 oldies but goodies premium ships list. So, title's pretty self-explanatory. We're talking about ships that are quite old in the game. Gotta remember, this game is pushing 7 years this year. It's really interesting to see how these games have, and especially in the game market today, how there's some game franchises that just keep pumping out like a whole new game every year, like how Assassin's Creed. I think they've kind of broken the cycle this year, but Assassin's Creed used to release like a whole new game, open world every single year after year after year. But then we have games like World of Tanks, World of Warships, and World of Warcraft that are 10 years, 7 years, 8 years old. It's crazy. But yeah, anyway, so these are ships that are up there in age, but still have managed to stand the test of time and are still pretty darn good in today's World of Warships. And needless to say, if you would ask me, hey, is this ship worth buying? If it's on this list, I would most definitely say, yep, it's worth the blooms, the money, the free XP, the coal, the research bureau points, whatever you got to do to get these ships on this list. I would say is absolutely worth it. And before we get going, this list is in no particular order. So like number 1 isn't better than number 5 in my opinion. Any of these 5 ships on this list are definitely worth it in my opinion. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started with number 5, which is the Tier 7 Premium German battleship, the Scharnhorst. Now, you might be thinking, Sealord, a German battleship out of the gate? An old German battleship out of the gate from the olden days. The days of, when close quarters combat was much more common. And this is a ship that is at Tier 7, so it is still very common for Tier 7 ships when they're in Tier 7 games to still get into close quarters combat. But the Scharnhorst is interesting, and it's kind of gone the same way that most of the other German battleships have gone in World of Warships. If you guys don't know, the German battleship, at least the mainline for sure, has definitely shifted over to being more of a main gun platform, especially after the buff to the dispersion ellipse, where they got the American battleship dispersion ellipse rather than the old German battleship dispersion ellipse, which is terrible. So the new German battleship dispersion ellipse makes the guns a little bit more consistent. Well, actually, a lot more consistent, honestly. If you play the Gneisenau, the Tier 7 tech line German battleship, playing Gneisenau today versus Gneisenau of 5 years ago, two completely different ships. Thanks to that buff there, and with some changes to other ships up and down the line, and the Preußen being the Tier 10 now, most of the German battleships, definitely from Tier 7 on up, are ideally in today's World Warships played as main battery focused battleships. You throw the reload booster, I'm sorry, the reload module on there when you get to the higher tier ships. And Scharnhorst today, if you throw a main battery build on the Scharnhorst and play her basically like a super cruiser, well, a large cruiser, like the Aegir. If you basically play it as a Tier 7 Aegir, she does quite well in today's World of Warships. And when she gets double up tier to Tier 9, again, if you play it like an Aegir, focus on your main battery, build into that, build into survivability, because this is still the Scharnhorst. This is still one of the tankiest ships. Well, definitely, I would say probably, if we're thinking about like the Hood and not throwing in the Nelson there with her superhero, this is like, I think, the tankiest Tier 7 battleship with that armor that this ship does have, especially if you know how to bait people into shooting your main battery belt. When you're angled, you'll be bouncing shells left and right, even when you get double up tiered to Tier 9. So if you run around mid range, use her guns with that nice sweet reload on them, and just focus on playing it like a large cruiser. This ship still does very well today. And then when you do get into those Tier 7 games and you can play it a bit closer, then she's back into her old element. She still has her torpedoes, she has her secondaries, and yeah, sure, if you don't have a full build onto it, you won't be able to do the meme secondary build like you used to be able to do. But even with a full main battery, a full secondary build on the Scharnhorst, with the buff that the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau did receive with the commander rework, and they can get their secondaries out much further than they could beforehand, it is still viable if you want to play it like that, but I would recommend a main battery build on the Scharnhorst. So it's interesting seeing how the Scharnhorst came out, and of course a lot of players played it as a secondary battleship, but now even in today's World of Warships, when the meta is a lot more passive at higher tier, and even the German main battleship line is now more of a main battery battleship line, the short can still do both. Now, of course, if you do build into the secondaries, it's going to be a lot more situational than if you build into the main battery guns. In the match watching the background right now, I'm a main battery gun build in this battle, but most of the action took place at sub 7 kilometers, and she still did perfectly fine and very well for a battleship, of course. Now, of course, this isn't a tier 7 game when I'm top tier. Of course, when you get double up tier, that's no fun for anybody. But the Short still was able to hang in there with her guns and her speed and her agility. Again, play it like a large cruiser when you get double up tiered, and she does quite well. Alright, moving on to number 4, we have the tier 8 Japanese heavy cruiser, the Atago. I've been talking about the Atago a lot recently, haven't I? So I won't spend too much time here with the Atago because we have talked about her quite a bit over the past couple of weeks. But again, no oldie but goodie list could be complete without the Atago, one of the oldest premium ships in the game. And if you don't count the Kitakami as being in the game anymore, then I believe this is the oldest premium ship in the game. There's, I think, like, what, 3 clones of this ship in the game too, with the various events and stuff. But the Atago, I mean, it's so good still today. 9-kilometer concealment if you build into it. You can stealth torpedo on the Atago. You have those sweet Japanese guns with the sweet Japanese HE Alpha and the fire chance on her, along with hydro and a heal and a tier 8 cruiser. Especially if you're playing a lot of mid-tier cruisers and even tier 8 cruisers, this is still the point at which cruisers explode more often than not when a battleship looks at them, and having a cruiser that has a heal at tier 8 is a big pickup for that cruiser. And take into consideration too the Atago with her rudder shift time and her, again, 9.8 kilometer concealment, this is a darn slippery ship to shoot at. Now, of course, as many of you know that have been playing this game for quite some time and have shot at an Atago and have managed to connect shells into the Atago, it does, of course, get citadeled. Not entirely unoften, but of course with that heal that does help you recover from that, where other tier 8 cruisers don't have that heal. Again, just a really sweet set of main battery guns, very accurate guns, good Japanese HE Alpha and fire chance. You get the torpedoes that go up to 10 kilometers that get it with a full stealth build. You can stealth torpedo in this cruiser from about 200 meters, but I mean, hey, it can still do it, and there's ways you can abuse that too, especially if a ship's pushing into you. And like what you're seeing going in the background match right now with the Atago, this ship is great at being on an off flank and forcing ships to push into it, because they gotta push up that flank if they want to do anything. But you're there going undetected, throwing torps at them, setting them on fire constantly, absolutely god-slapping DDs out of existence with your Japanese HE Alpha. This is such a good premium ship, and an excellent ship too if you're going up the Japanese cruiser line and want a Japanese cruiser commander trainer, or just a Japanese commander trainer in general now because of the way the commander rework goes. But, like, yes, you could train a commander on the Atago and go straight and throw him up on the Zal right away. It's the same build you're going to be using on the Atago as on all the Japanese cruisers. So, again, an excellent cruiser, one that has most definitely stood the test of time, and one that I enjoy playing today as well. Going on down to number 3, we have the Tier 6 Premium British Battleship, the Warspite. The Warspite, man, this ship has been, this is one of the, not only the best of the older premiums, but still one of the absolute best premiums in the game today. Basically a Yamato at tier 6 with those 15-inch guns. Because again, 15-inch guns, like we were talking about with, I think we're talking about, what ship were we talking about the other day? I can't remember, but we're talking about another 15-inch gun. Oh, the Renown. More 15-inch at tier 6. Now, back in the day, of course, Warspite was one of the few battleships at tier 6 that had guns that could, overmatch most of what it could see when it is top tier. Of course, that number has increased today, but she can still do it. Doesn't matter that other ships can do it, she can still do it too. And she gets the normal battleship AP. She was released long before the British battleship line was released in full. And, I mean, this ship is tough. She isn't tough in terms of like her armor, but she has a large HP pool, and then she gets the Warspite heal, which is an improved heal, which if you watch this channel long enough, you've heard me call improved heals Warspite heals. That's the nickname I like to give them, because Warspite was one of the first ships to have a better than average heal at its tier. Now, it's not like the British battleship heal where you can print back 2/3 of your ship after eating a couple of citadels. No, but it is still a better than average heal, and she's actually darn maneuverable for a tier 6 battleship. She's feels very similar to the American battleships from like tier 3 up to tier, I believe it's 7. They get the improved turning circle radius where they bleed less. Well, not improved turning circle radius. They get the improved bleed speed when they turn because they're so slow. Wargaming did show them some mercy, and when they turn, they bleed less speed than other battleships. She feels very similar to that. I'm not sure if she does for sure have that, but she's very maneuverable. And her turrets used to be glacial, but a little while ago they did spray some WD-40 on her turrets. Now her turrets maneuver, I think it's 50 seconds. And it used to be a 72-second 180 time back in the day. So her turrets are much more maneuverable. She has some amazingly accurate 15-inch guns with normal battleship AP, which means that you can easily dunk on many a ship when you're top tier. This is a ship that also up tiers okay. I'm not going to say amazingly well, because when you get double up tier to tier 8, you still have 15-inch guns, and you still have pretty darn accurate 15-inch guns as well, but of course you're still a slow-moving target, and a pretty large target too at that, with the meaty superstructure that the Warspite does have. But yes, a ship that has definitely aged well. It definitely stood up to all the changes that has been thrown at her throughout the years, and one that I still enjoy playing today. Alright, coming in at number 2, we have the tier 10 reward ship, or resource ship, American ship, that is, the Salem. The tier 10 American cruiser. The Des Moines copy-paste with a couple of tweaks here and there. So the main differences between Des Moines and Salem is that Salem has a shorter range radar. Hers is 8.9 or 9 kilometers if you want to round up. And she has a super heal, along with some little shuffling around of their consumables as well. But other than that, they are the same ship. So the Salem has a lot of the pros that the Des Moines does. Those very, very, very rapid-firing main battery guns that, man, and there's something I found a little odd. I made a video a little while ago called the original HE Spammer, because if you've been playing this game for long enough and you come across a Des Moines, if you're not broadside onto them, they're just going to keep throwing HE at you every, was it 4.3 seconds if they build into it with all the skills and such. And that's, to me, that's HE spamming, a never-ending stream of HE coming at you. But a lot of commenters were saying, no, it's an AP ship. Yeah, it's got good AP, but most of the time, especially if you play Battleship, you're going to be eating HE from this thing. But anyway, Salem has the same ability too, of course. If anything's bowing to you where you can't bite into it, you can load your HE and absolutely melt them down with your guns. If something shows you broadside, you do get the improved American super heavy AP. You load that up and you absolutely just chew through them so fast with that AP. And again, with that quick reload, it's a terrifying combination. But both ships sit up out of the water fairly high. It's a weakness of the American cruiser line through and through. They have very large freeboards, and they're very easy to citadel if you ever again shot at them in a battleship or anything with semi-large guns. But the Salem fixes that by getting a super heal. So this allows the Salem to play a bit more aggressive. You get a little bit closer. It's a lot more forgiving because you have that super heal, and your radar is shorter range too, so you gotta kind of play her closer to the action. But again, she still has the good AP, the excellent fire rate, and a ship that is, well, I mean, it was good back in the day and still is good today, and is one that I would recommend. And she's one of the older resource ships too. I think she was one of the first coal ships ever introduced into the game. And finally, coming down to number 1, we have the tier 10 resource Soviet heavy cruiser, the Moskva. Now, the Moskva is interesting because it wasn't always a premium ship. She's actually technically a relatively new premium ship, but this ship's been in the game since patch 5.4. As if you're not aware, when the Petropavlovsk was released and the Soviet cruiser line was split, rather than keep the Moskva at her tier 10 spot in the Soviet cruiser tech line, she was moved to the armory for coal. Now, Moskva is one of my favorite cruisers in the game. She's well, if you've played a lot of Soviet large ships like the Kremlin, the Petropavlovsk, the Stalingrad, she plays pretty much just the same. It's the cookie cutter Soviet large cruiser playstyle. Pointy bow toward the enemy team, shoot AP at their broadsides, burn down them if they try to angle at all. But the Moskva was probably the best one at this. I would argue even better than the Stalingrad when it comes to, definitely when it comes to the HE DPM. But AP, of course, Stalingrad wins that hands down. But this is a lot easier to get than the Stalingrad. So the Moskva, she's old, she's a really, really, really good ship still today. You have to be a bit more careful with her, though. You can't do the old style of Moskva gameplay where you find an island, hug it, and point your bow toward the enemy and just sit there for all of the match. You can do that in some cases, and she's still a darn hard cruiser to deal with if she gets into a proper position where, of course, like half the team can't focus her down. Her guns are some of the sweetest guns in the game when it comes to cruiser guns, in my opinion. I know a lot of players say, Petropavlovsk has surpassed her. I would disagree with that. At close range, I would say Petropavlovsk is the better ship, but at mid and long range, Moskva is the much better ship when it comes to HE, DPM, and AP, and, well, being able to hit anything at long range. Petro has a hard time hitting stuff past 13 kilometers regularly. Moskva is much better for that. And with the guns that the Moskva has, she's still quite capable of citadeling battleships at 15 kilometers if they aren't paying attention and showing her flat broadside. Now, not every battleship, of course, but she can still surprise quite a few, definitely American battleship players if they aren't paying attention, and, of course, British battleship players, and of course the battle cruisers that are out too. She absolutely eats those up. She's a fantastic ship. She has radar, the 12 kilometer Soviet radar, and it has a decent runtime too. It's not super short like the 12 and 11 seconds of some of the newer Soviet tech line ships, and she gets the good old cruiser burn time. She does not have battleship burn time, thank God. She's one of the few large cruisers that seem to have escaped that. Well, I say large cruisers like, of course, the Stalingrad, the Alaska, and such. Moskva is a very large cruiser, a very, very, very large tech line cruiser for sure, back when she was in the tech line. Large enough to basically be considered one by many of the community, but thankfully Wargaming still classifies her as just a normal cruiser, so she gets that really sweet short cruiser burn time. And in many ways, that makes her tankier than Stalingrad now. Of course, Stalingrad was first introduced, and she had that, that base cruiser burn time. Then you build into it with all the commander skills that you can't build into it anymore because of the commander rework. Of course, Stalingrad was tankier, but now, in many cases, Moskva can outlast Stalingrad when it comes to sustaining constant HE damage and being set on fire, of course, with all the crazy HE spammy ships that get at higher tier now. And of course, too, if you've got Kuznetsov, definitely throw them on their Moskva. You get that free damage con and repair when your health gets down to 10%, and that makes this ship even more tankier. And it gets Hydro, too, on top of that as well. Almost forgot about that. But yes, a really, really, really tanky cruiser with some hard-hitting guns and can still outlast today, even with all the current HE spam, thanks to that original cruiser burn time. So guys, those are my top 5 oldies but goodies. Let me know what you guys think about that in the comments down below. What are your top 5 oldies but goodies? Let me know that down below as well. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 40,000 subs, and I cannot thank you guys enough for that. Hope you're having a wonderful Monday. Have a wonderful week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.